So now let's go to the questions. I have not read these questions. I probably have more questions that we're going to have time to discuss, answer for you. So I'm going to take them in the order I have in front of me. This first one is from Linda, and she wants to know, how important is forgiveness? Am I supposedly to actually verbalize to a person that's hurt me and my loved ones? But what if they're in denial and they refuse to believe that they did anything wrong? So I have a feeling if I did say to a person, I forgive you, that they'd only get angrier. There's two kinds of forgiveness. I'm not talking about the forgiveness of yourself. I'm talking about forgiveness as it deals with another person. There's a kind that somebody has truly hurt you and they know it. And they feel guilty and bad about it. And if you're willing to release that and you tell them that you forgive them, they'll feel grateful for it and they will accept it. And they'll love you for forgiving them. Then there's another kind of where a person refuses to believe that they did anything that requires your forgiveness. They actually might get angry with you. I had that happen to me the other day, which I'll share with you in a minute. But that's okay, because by you saying I forgive you and really meaning it, what you really do is you are releasing from yourself the anger and hostility that you might have towards them. So even if they choose to acknowledge that they did anything to require forgiveness, even if they should get angrier at you, that's okay, because you have released from you, your temple of God, which you are, the anger that you had towards them for what they did to you, even if they won't acknowledge it. I had that happen to me the other day. I was in a situation where there was many other people at a function, and one person made a remark at me, which really upset me, because he'd made the remark in the past, and I got angry at him. And I told him how angry I was at him, because it was so inappropriate what he said to me. And he got shook up or got upset because I showed my anger at him, and he walked away like he was, because he didn't know how to react. Well, 10 minutes later, I went up to him. I said, I want you to know that I forgive you. I apologize. And he looked at me shocked. He didn't realize that I wasn't condoning what he said to me. What I was doing, I was releasing the anger I had towards him because I wanted to enjoy myself for the rest of the evening. So I hope that makes sense to you. And I hope it makes sense to you, and I've answered your question, Linda. That was an excellent question. The next question comes from Mariana, and she wants to know tell us about free will and destiny. How are our lives predestined? How much of the here and now is our free will? We have free will. This is a gift that God gave us. We are the only species on earth that has the gift of free will. And of course, that's because we're God's children. We have God's Spirit inside of us. That's a gift that God gave us. But before we come onto this earth, before we come incarnated into this lifetime, we meet with those who are our advisors and our guides on the other side. And we make a decision as to how we're going to live our life in this life. What do we want to experience? Was I a bigot in my last life, where I was prejudiced towards people, let's say, of different skin color, and I want to experience coming into this lifetime atoning for that karma? So in a sense that I'm predestining myself that that's going to be my intent, and that's going to be part of my mission in my life, but I might go off on a totally different mission because of free will and be a bigot again, or just not pay any attention to the fact that I had made that commitment as part of my predestiny. So the answer to the question is that yes, our lives are predestined from the time we're born, and yet at the same time, we have the free will to change that destiny. I remember one time a friend came to my office. We had twin boys, 2 twin boys, and they couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 months old. They looked alike, they were identical. One of them got out of his little chair on the floor, his little seat on the floor, and started crawling around. The other one just sat there in his little chilled baby seat and smiled. And he said, you know, Nick, I don't understand that here are 2 boys that are twins. He said, same DNA, same parents, and one of them is totally carefree and nothing bothers him. He's always a smile on the face, and the other one is constantly getting the things and looking for things. How could that be? Well, the difference is because their DNA, their spiritual DNA is different. Their spiritual DNA is part of their past lives that they had. So even though that they have the same parents and the same DNA as far as their genes, they have totally different missions in life and totally different destinies and totally different personalities. Because of the things that influence our lives while we're growing up, which is our parental experiences that we have in our environment that we're growing up in, the genes that we have, which is that DNA. Some people feel also has to do with the year you're born, the time you're born, and the location of the planets, which I personally don't get involved in that, because the most overwhelming thing is our past life experiences, our spiritual DNA that we bring forth with us from our past life. That is overwhelmingly 90% of who we are. And the other part, our environment, genes, perhaps is 10%. Because how many times do we know the story of a family that has 4 children? They're the same parents and they grow up in the same environment. One grows up and decides to become a priest. Another one grows up and decides to be a playboy, just enjoy life, a bon vivant. Another one becomes an academic and just wants to study all the time and continue their education. And the fourth one ends up becoming a criminal. 4 different lives. And yet they all came from the same backgrounds and genes, but their spiritual DNA was totally different. And that's the reason why. So yes, we do have free will, even though we do have a destiny predestined before we come into this earth in terms of what we hope to attempt to accomplish in this lifetime. The next question she asks is, how do we achieve world peace? There's such a thing as universal consciousness and an evil consciousness and positive consciousness. During the Second World War, I believe the country of Germany was possessed with an evil consciousness. I don't mean all the people evil, but the influence that their leaders had on them and the way they lived their lives and created the concentration camps and the incredible acts of inhumanity were done because of an evil consciousness. Well, there exists today around different parts of the world evil consciousness and also positive consciousness, a loving consciousness. How do we attain world peace? How do we achieve it? And that's for every one of us to do everything we possibly can to get people to embrace universal love and universal compassion. If we could influence the lives of enough people, even 10% of the population, to have universal love and universal compassion that crosses all kinds of boundaries, ethnic boundaries, racial boundaries, geographic boundaries, the boundaries that are created by the different economic environments we live in, where there are poor people and wealthy people and people who are middle class. If universal compassion broke all those boundaries down and it was able to be incorporated among the leaders in the world in government, the academic world, and the business world, we could achieve world peace. And there wouldn't be a hungry child in the world. Unfortunately, what happens so many times, think of a classroom where we're all in a classroom and we're all juniors in college. But our teacher is a teacher with an education that's designed to teach second graders. Or the leaders who are the leaders in the world, the leaders in our country, might be people that should be people of the highest caliber who believe in universal compassion and universal love, but so many of them might be influenced by personal greed and personal ambition that they're not promoting universal love and universal compassion. Instead, they're promoting their own self-interest. Until we can change those type of people or put people in positions of influence in the world who indeed do believe and encompass and embrace universal love and universal compassion, then we will achieve world peace. And we're part of that. We're part of that. Those who participate on our website, nickbunick.com, the one you're on right now. We're part of that effort to help people to evolve spiritually, to climb that ladder, to climb those steps of 1,000 steps, to become closer and closer to Christ consciousness and to God. That's what we're doing, and that's what we're trying to help other people. Be loving kindness, and all around you, you create the same. And eventually, hopefully, during our lifetimes, we will have world peace. Or at least be making tremendous strides towards it. This next series of questions I have from Kate. Kate from Canada. Thank you, Kate, for sending these in. She's a member of our website, of our spiritual family. And she says, when Joshua said, in my Father's kingdom, parentheses or house, there are many mansions, was he talking literally, or was he talking about other planets in the universe with life on them? No, he wasn't talking about other planets. First of all, we don't know if Joshua ever said that. So basically, Kate, you're asking me to give my response to something that is in the Gospels. And did Joshua actually say, in my Father's kingdom there are many mansions? I don't know. I never heard him say that, but I'd like to paraphrase that by saying that there are many different ways to reach God. There are so many different roads to travel. There's so many different journeys we can take in order to get to God's mansion, to get to become at one with God. Some may choose to live a life of the academic world. Others may choose to live a life materialistically motivated. But regardless of that, we still have that part of our lives that are spiritual part. Regardless of what occupation we take, or how we wish to live our lives as far as creating an economic base for ourselves. And so I believe that what Joshua was saying, as to many different mansions, if he did say that, God's kingdom, basically meant there are many different places that we can go to. When our spirit leaves our body, there are many different levels that we go to before we reach the top. Before we reach the top, we're like Sarah, where you're on your 1,000th step of the pyramid, and she doesn't have to be incarnate again. So when she passes, when Sarah has her spirit and soul make its transition from her body, the mansion she's going to go to will be God's mansion, because she will go to the highest level. But others of us, including myself, who are not at that level on our pyramid, who might be in step 444, when our spirit leaves our body, when we make that transition, we will go to that place in the spirit world, which is another house of God, where we'll be with other people who are at the same level we are, in order for us to continue learning in the spirit world and being able to evaluate our past life we had and what is going to be our mission in our next lives. So, in that sense, yes, there are many different mansions in God's kingdom, which means many different levels in the spiritual world before we reach that point where, like Sarah, she'd be so upset at me if she was watching the show because she doesn't like me to talk that way, but where she in turn will also, unlike her, where her next transition will be in the spiritual world at the highest level, because she'll be at one with God in Christ consciousness. The next question Kate asked, she says, Daniel Brinkley, who was an author that wrote a couple of books, has stated that there is no hell, but Daniel says there's a gray area where lost souls are earthbound, where spirits dwell, like a purgatory. She's asking me, do I believe in this also? Daniel and I, when I was going around the country in 1997, speaking on a speaking tour every weekend with other authors, I got to become very, very close friends with Daniel. He's a wild, crazy guy. I love the guy. You can't help but love him. And Daniel, 2 different times in his life, first time he got struck by lightning, literally died. His spirit left his body, he went into the spiritual world. And then they returned him back into his body, even though they were already making plans for his funeral. In other words, he had an NDE, what they call a near-death experience. But he actually did experience dying and returned back to his body. You know there are people that had this experience. What happened to Daniel twice. And when Daniel says that there is no hell, I totally agree with him. There is no such place as hell. But he does say, as the question is asked, there's a gray area for lost souls. And that's true. But those are souls that are living in this lifetime or previous lifetimes that were very, very low in the pyramid. The Hitlers in the world, the Bin Ladens, the Stalins. So that when their spirit leaves their body, when they make a transition of soul, they go to a very, very low level in the spiritual world. Very low level, which certainly you may call it a gray level, a gray area, because it doesn't have the same rewards and benefits and environment that those in the higher level are exposed to. And I didn't know if Daniel calls it a purgatory, because a purgatory is a place where you stay in it because you didn't justify going to heaven according to the Christian religion. So I'd say that in a sense it's a purgatory because they'll come back again in the next lifetime and try to live a life that's more meaningful, a life that has more love and compassion in it, in order to start ascending and evolving to a higher level in that pyramid. So in a sense you might say it's purgatory in that it's only a temporary place, that they'll try to achieve higher levels when they come back in the next lifetime. Kate asked a third question. She's talking about a Hollywood director that recently committed suicide. It was in the newspapers. And she says that it saddens so many people who have such emotional, physical, and mental pain when someone takes their own life. I know the church would have you believe. She knows that the church has you believe. But what really happens to people who commit suicide? I'd love to give a comforting message to families who've lost someone that has committed suicide. Which I've had 2 different times in my life, people that I know to commit suicide. And sometimes in life that when a person wants to shut themselves off from life, shut themselves off from society, they can become totally introverted and become a hermit. And of course the ultimate is taking their own life. And what happens to them, they're not punished. They will go to a place in the spiritual world where other people who also committed suicide, took their own life, also are there in that same plane, that same level, where they'll be given the spiritual teaching and the spiritual help to explain to them the consequences of taking their own lives and letting them see the impact they had and the people they left behind that loved them. So they realize that it was almost in a sense an act of selfishness, even if they didn't think of it that way. Sometimes people commit suicide because there was such physical pain, because of sickness or disease they have, and the quality of life they have is so bad. I knew of one person who, her father committed suicide by shooting himself with a gun, but he was a doctor who had become addicted to drugs, which had had impact on his life and his actual brain. And he left a suicide note behind and says, I do not want you to be mad at me. I want you to know that I'm doing this by free will, something I've thought out because the quality of my life is so bad that I feel that I don't want to continue in this body. So I'm intentionally choosing to do this, and I don't want you to feel remorse towards me or to be angry at me. So we have, at times, people commit suicide under those kinds of conditions, which is different than a person committing suicide in anger or for other reasons that should perhaps not be justified. That was an act of selfishness. And I'll tell you something what I believe is about ghosts. The Spirit has shared with me. What is a ghost? Is a ghost? There are people who claim, and people in television programs, a ghost is a spirit a person that died, and the spirit doesn't want to leave the place they're in. It's locked into that physical location and haunting that location. And that's not accurate. There are people who pass away on earth who are so connected to an environment that they might have lived in. They might have experienced a horrible death there, or it might have been a place that they love so much that while they're there in the spirit world, once in a while they'll project their spirit into that location physically on earth. Not their bodies, but their spirit. There'll be a projection of their spirit, like a holocaust, like what's the word? Not a holo. Well, it's one where the people see a ghost. They say, well, you can almost see through it, like a hologram of their spirit. And that's what a ghost is. A ghost is actually an image of the person that's in the spiritual world that they have projected back onto Earth at a location, for whatever the reason might be. It might be to see a loved one. In one of my books that I wrote, that I put together, which is called Transitions of Soul, there are many stories, and there are people, true stories of people that were, at that time, were subscribers to my newsletter, which now, of course, my newsletter is my website. But there were subscribers to which wrote stories, a series of stories, which we made into a book called Transition of Soul. I think I picked out 80 of them. And a number of them said that they had experience with their loved one who came, sometimes it could be an adult, sometimes it could be a child, all of a sudden appeared to them, in front of them. And they could see him. They could see that child or that loved one or the husband or a parent. Well, someone might say that was a ghost. Well, what happened was that that loved one was able to project their image of themselves, like in a hologram, to their loved one that's still on Earth, to let them know that I still love you, I'm still with you, I still care about you, and I still exist, but I'm in spirit now rather than a physical body. Does that make sense to you? I hope I'm explaining this in words that are comprehensible, because I don't think I've ever had that conversation before, maybe once or twice in my life, with somebody explaining ghosts. And it could be somebody over a beer or a glass of wine. They say, "You got to be kidding, Nick," because they might not know my background or might know where I'm getting my information from. Because in my own life here where I live, I don't walk around. I do practice my vows, trying to be love and energy to other people and be gentle and kindness. But I don't walk around saying, "Do you know that 2,000 years ago my spirit and soul lived?" Occasionally I'll do that as a joke. I always get a wonderful response. But anyway, that's a different subject another time. So I'll move on to the next question from Sunflower. Sunflower sent this question in, and she's a member of our spiritual family on our site. And she says she doesn't want to be a hog, but she has a whole bunch of questions. She says, "Nick, is 1,000 years of peace soon to come?" Now, the way Sunflower is getting this 1,000 years of peace, it's been prophesized for many, many years that when the Aquarian age begins, with the Aquarian age will come 1,000 years of peace. Right now we're in the age that's called the Aryan age, Aryan, which many people believe started the 15th century. That the 15th century started the Aryan age, and that someday, and nobody knows when, there is no predicted date, that the next period of history from a spiritual standpoint will be the Aquarian age, and that will be the beginning of 1,000 years of peace and love, and maybe 1,000 years of people celebrate the world living with universal love and universal compassion. So I don't know when it's coming. Maybe it's starting right now. Maybe what we're doing on our website and the messages that we're sending out is the beginning, the predecessor to the Aquarian age. The next question that Sunflower asks is, quote, "Expand on, quote, be love and kindness, and all around you shall create the same," end of quote. How does this radiation of love and kindness work in significance? How can just one person doing this have a significant impact? Well, this comes across from one of our vows. If you look on my website, you see on the right-hand side it says vows. These are vows that were given to me by Spirit that I've shared with people on my website, my spiritual family. And every so often we'll concentrate just on one vow for weeks and weeks and say the impact it had on people. So let's talk about be love and kindness all around you, create the same. I know that I try to do that every day in my life with every person I come in contact with. I fail sometimes. We all can fail. But I know that I've touched the lives of many, many people who don't even realize I'm doing it. There's a particular place that I go for breakfast every morning, brunch. I go for brunch and I sit at the counter and I know the names of the waiters. I know the names of the gals that work behind the counter, because behind the counter they're making lattes and every one of them will come over and give me a hug because I've given them love and kindness every day I've met with them. And the waitress will come over and give me a hug. I've made a difference in their lives, and I hope that they in turn will take that what I give them, the love and kindness I show to them, that they feel, and turn around and give that same love and kindness to another person. It becomes a domino effect. You can give love and kindness to just one person and create that feeling within that person, and they in turn can give it to the other person, and it goes on until it builds and builds and builds. I do that with the people in the grocery stores. The bundler. A lot of times the bundlers, people who put the groceries in their bags are mentally challenged people. And I show them love and respect. And to the cashiers. And I'm telling you, you can make a difference in their lives. And they in turn can make a difference in the lives of other people because of the love and kindness that you give to them, because it becomes contagious.